The stellar nova moved silently through the void, its sleek body cutting through the fabric of space like a blade. On the bridge, Captain Orion stood at the helm, his eyes narrowed as the starfield outside shimmered in his gaze. The galaxy's fate seemed as uncertain as the ever-shifting stars. "Captain, enemy fleet detected at Sector 19, bearing 76. They're closing in." Lieutenant Arias' voice broke the silence. Orion's pulse quickened, but his expression remained cold. "Plot a course, Lieutenant. We intercept them now," he commanded, his voice unwavering. "Aye, Captain," Aria replied. The crew sprang into action, adjusting coordinates, activating battle protocols. On the view screen, the enemy fleet loomed closer, dark silhouettes framed against the backdrop of distant stars. The air on the bridge was charged, heavy with the anticipation of battle. "All hands, prepare for combat. This will decide the fate of the galaxy," Orion muttered under his breath as the crew moved with purpose, ready for the chaos ahead. The stellar nova emerged from hyperspace, its sudden transition from the surreal speed of the stars to the cold emptiness of normal space disorienting. "Captain, we're in position," Lieutenant Aria reported. Her voice was calm, but laced with urgency. "The enemy fleet is within range." Orion nodded, turning his gaze to the looming fleet ahead. His eyes narrowed. "Initiate the battle formation," he ordered. The crew sprang into action, preparing for the imminent conflict. The fleet in front of them was massive, its ships dark and foreboding, their weapons systems already primed. "We need to outmaneuver them," Orion continued. "Farron, take us to their left flank. Aria, keep the shields at maximum. Prepare for sustained fire." His orders rang out, each one precise and calculated. The tension was palpable on the bridge. The stellar nova slowly turned, aligning itself with the enemy ready to engage. The fate of the galaxy rested on their next move. The space between the two fleets closed rapidly. Captain Orion stood resolute, his eyes fixed on the enemy ships as they neared. The stellar nova's weapons powered up, the hum of energy building in the air. "We have them," Farron said from the weapons station, his voice filled with quiet confidence. "Ready to fire, Captain." Orion gave a single sharp nod. "On my command." The ship sensors buzzed as the enemy fleet adjusted its formation, a clear sign they were preparing to strike. Orion's mind raced. He could almost feel the weight of the battle, the lives at stake, the consequences of failure. "Now!" he shouted. Farron pressed the button, and the stellar nova's weapons unleashed a barrage of energy blasts. The enemy fleet retaliated instantly, their lasers cutting through space like streaks of lightning. The battle had begun. The battle raged on, the stellar nova moving fluidly between the incoming fire from the enemy ships. The crew was working in perfect unison, each person reacting to the chaos with precision. "Shields holding at 75%, Captain," Aria reported, her voice steady despite the intensity of the situation. "We've taken some hits, but we're still in the fight." Orion's grip on the armrest tightened. "We need to break through their front lines," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "Farron, fire at their lead ship's engines. Aria, prepare to engage evasive maneuvers." The stellar nova lurched as another blast rocked the ship, but it held firm. Orion's mind raced as he watched the enemy fleet shift its tactics, adjusting its formation to counter the stellar nova's moves. "Keep pushing forward," Orion muttered. "We can't let them regroup." The stellar nova cut through the enemy's ranks, its weapons firing with deadly precision. "Their front ships are down," Farron reported, his voice filled with triumph. "We've broken their lines, Captain." Orion's expression remained stoic, but a flicker of relief crossed his face. "Maintain pressure," he ordered. "We can't give them a chance to regroup." As the enemy fleet scrambled to respond, the stellar nova pressed its advantage, its engines flaring as it darted between enemy ships, striking them one by one. "We've got one more to go," Aria said, her voice calm. "Their flagship is on our tail." Orion nodded. "Take it down." With a final, coordinated strike, the stellar nova fired its last barrage, and the flagship of the enemy fleet erupted in a burst of flame. The battle was over. The aftermath of the battle left the stellar nova hovering in the midst of the debris of the enemy fleet. The tension on the bridge was palpable as the crew processed the intense engagement. Captain Orion stood at the helm, his eyes scanning the vast expanse of space, the remains of the battlefield still floating in front of him. "We've won this round, but they'll be back," Orion said, his voice grim. Lieutenant Aria, her fingers still hovering over the controls, nodded in agreement. "We've barely made a dent in their numbers. We'll need more time to regroup." Farron, who had been monitoring the ship's status, looked up. "Damage is minimal, Captain. Shields are at 80%, and engines are functioning at full capacity. However, I recommend a full sweep of the area to ensure there are no remaining threats." Orion glanced back at him, his expression hardening. "Prepare for a full sweep. We can't afford to let our guard down." The crew moved to their stations, ready to continue the mission. As the stellar nova conducted its sweep of the area, Captain Orion paced the bridge, his mind preoccupied with the consequences of the battle. "Any signs of reinforcements?" he asked, his tone edged with tension. Aria shook her head. "Nothing yet, Captain, but we need to stay alert. Their fleet could have been a diversion." Orion paused, thinking, "I don't trust this. There's something bigger at play here." Just as he finished speaking, the ship's sensor alarms blared, a new anomaly detected on their screens. "What is it?" Farron asked, his voice sharp. Aria analyzed the data. "It's another ship, but this one isn't like any we've seen before. It's massive, far larger than anything in this sector." The entire bridge fell silent. What kind of ship would need this kind of size? Orion muttered, his mind racing. "Prepare to approach cautiously. Let's see what we're dealing with." The stellar nova approached the colossal alien ship cautiously, its sensors picking up increasingly complex signals emanating from the ship. "This thing is alive, Juno," the communications officer said, her voice filled with both wonder and caution. "The energy signatures are fluctuating wildly. It's not a normal ship." Captain Orion's brow furrowed. "Are we being hailed?" Juno shook her head. "No direct communication, Captain, but there's something else. The signals, they seem to be reaching out like a call, searching for something." Orion's face darkened. "Could it be a trap?" Farron, who had been monitoring the ship's movement, spoke up. "I don't think so, Captain. It's stationary, but it's generating a lot of energy. We should be cautious." Orion nodded. "Keep scanning it. I want a full readout before we make contact." He turned to the crew. "Doi. Prepare for anything." The stellar nova docked with the alien ship, the air tense as the crew suited up for what lay ahead. Captain Orion was the first to step onto the strange vessel, his boots making no sound as they met the smooth surface of the alien floor. The ship's interior was vast and dark, with the same organic structure that stretched endlessly in every direction. The walls pulsed with energy, almost as if the ship itself was alive. "Stay alert," Orion warned his crew, as they followed him into the eerie silence of the alien ship. They moved deeper, their footsteps echoing in the vast space. Lieutenant Aria scanned the walls with her handheld device. No signs of life, but the energy readings are off the charts. It's like the entire ship is one massive power core. Farron gripped his weapon, eyes scanning the shadows. "Feels like we're walking into a trap." Orion's voice was low. "Let's find out what this ship wants." As they ventured further into the depths of the alien ship, they reached a central chamber. In the middle of the room was a massive console, the shape and function of which was entirely foreign to them. Juno approached it cautiously, her fingers tracing the glowing symbols on its surface. "This is a command center," she said, her voice filled with awe. "But it's like nothing we've ever seen. These symbols, they might be a form of communication." Captain Orion stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he examined the symbols. "Can you decipher it?" Juno shook her head. "Not yet. It's a complex language, but I think it's trying to communicate with us." Farron's grip on his weapon tightened. "Is this another trap, or are we dealing with something peaceful?" Orion's expression was hard. "We'll find out, but we need to be ready for anything. The alien console flickered to life, glowing brighter as Juno's hands danced over its surface, deciphering the symbols. The air around them vibrated with an unseen energy, and the ship's eerie hum grew louder. "It's responding," Juno said, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and caution. "This is definitely a communication system." Captain Orion stood beside her, watching intently as the symbols shifted, forming recognizable patterns. "What's it saying?" he asked. Juno's brow furrowed as she processed the information. "It's not speaking in words," she said slowly. "It's projecting emotions, feelings, an invitation perhaps. It wants us to come closer." The room seemed to pulse with a faint light. Farron, always the skeptic, crossed his arms. "Or it's setting us up for something. We should proceed with caution." Orion nodded, his expression unreadable. "We'll approach cautiously. Aria, prepare the ship for extraction in case this is a trap." The crew moved forward, uncertain of what awaited them but resolved to face it together. The deeper they ventured into the alien ship, the stranger it became. The air grew colder, and the walls began to shimmer, as if alive. The crew followed the signals guided by the mysterious invitation, until they reached a vast chamber. At the center of the room stood a massive crystalline structure, glowing with an inner light. "What is that?" Farron asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't like this," Juno said, her hand resting on her weapon. "This feels too intentional." Captain Orion moved closer, his gaze locked on the crystal. "I don't know," he said quietly, "but it's the heart of the ship. This is where the signal is coming from." He stepped forward, his boots echoing in the silence. "Let's see what happens when we get closer." The crystal's glow intensified as they approached, a hum vibrating through the air, like the heartbeat of the ship itself. As Captain Orion extended his hand to touch the crystal, the room trembled. The entire ship seemed to come alive, the walls shifting and groaning like an ancient creature waking from a long slumber. The crystal responded, its light flashing, and the air hummed with an almost tangible energy. "Captain, pull back!" Farron shouted, his eyes wide with alarm. But it was too late. The crystal pulsed one last time, sending a shockwave through the room. Orion staggered back, but the shockwave continued to grow, ripping through the structure of the alien ship. The lights flickered and went out, plunging the crew into darkness. A deep, resonating voice echoed in their minds, a voice ancient and powerful. "You have awakened me," it said, its tone both commanding and sorrowful. "Now, you will answer for what you have disturbed." The shockwave subsided, leaving the crew in stunned silence. As their vision adjusted to the dim light, they saw the shape of a figure materializing before them, formed from the glowing energy of the crystal. "Who or what are you?" Orion asked, his voice steady but filled with awe. The figure seemed to be made of light and shadow, its form shifting with every movement. It spoke again, its voice echoing in their minds. "I am the last guardian, the keeper of this ship. You have disturbed my slumber, and now I must judge you." Juno stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly. "We did not come here to cause harm. We are explorers seeking knowledge." The Guardian's form shifted. "Your presence has awakened forces beyond your understanding. Your fate is tied to this ship's legacy. If you wish to survive, you must prove yourself." Orion's jaw clenched. "What do we need to do?" he asked. The Guardian's form loomed over the crew, its glowing eyes fixed on them. "The trials you face will test your strength, your wisdom, and your will to survive. If you succeed, you will be granted the knowledge of the stars," the Guardian intoned. "But if you fail, you will be lost to the void." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. "What kind of trials?" Farron asked, his voice firm but wary. "The trials of the mind and spirit," the Guardian replied, its voice reverberating in the chamber. "The path you choose will determine your fate. Only those worthy may access the ship's power." Orion took a step forward, his face resolute. "We will prove ourselves." The Guardian's form flickered, and then the chamber began to shift, revealing a dark labyrinthine path ahead. Then begin, the guardian said, its voice fading. The first trial awaits. The crew readied themselves, knowing that the hardest part of their journey was just beginning. The maze of mirrors seemed to stretch infinitely, each reflection an echo of the crew's inner fears and doubts. Captain Orion, now at the front, led his crew through the twisting paths, each person battling the reflections of their own insecurities. Farron stood before his mirror, his reflection smirking at him. "You'll always be haunted by your past, Farron," it sneered. But Farron's voice was steady as he spoke to his reflection. "I'm not that man anymore. I've moved past it." His reflection flickered and disappeared. The crew continued through the maze, the whispers of doubt fading with each step. The final mirror before them loomed large, its surface reflecting a dark void. Orion stepped up to it, and for the first time his own reflection spoke to him in a voice filled with sorrow. "Will you lead them to their doom?" it asked. Orion's hand clenched into a fist. "I'll lead them to victory," he replied with conviction, his voice unwavering. The moment the crew stepped past the final mirror, the chamber shifted once more. The walls of the maze faded, revealing an enormous circular room with an alien throne at its center. The atmosphere was heavy with an ancient power, as if the room had been waiting for them. Atop the throne sat a figure, more radiant than the Guardian, more powerful than any being they had ever seen. It was surrounded by a field of swirling light, and its eyes glowed with an ancient, unfathomable wisdom. "Welcome, travelers," the figure intoned. "You have completed the first of many trials. Now, the final trial awaits. Prove your worth." The crew stood motionless, their eyes locked on the figure before them. "What must we do?" Orion asked, his voice steady. The figure raised a hand, and the room darkened. "Face the ultimate challenge, the trial of the soul. Only then can you access the true power of this ship." The room darkened as the Guardian's voice echoed in their minds, filling the space with an oppressive weight. "To pass the trial of the soul," the Guardian explained, "you must confront the deepest part of yourselves, the truth that lies beneath your outer strength." The floor beneath the crew cracked open, revealing an abyss of swirling darkness. "Step forward," the voice commanded. "Only those with the strength of soul may endure this trial." Orion stood first, stepping toward the void. The others followed, each stepping into the darkness. Suddenly, they found themselves in a realm of their own making. Orion stood alone in a vast desert, the sky above blood red, his reflection facing him. "You are not a leader," the reflection mocked. "You're a failure. You will lead them into ruin." Orion gritted his teeth, facing the truth buried deep within. "I will not fall to this. I will protect them," he declared, the winds howling around him. As Orion faced his reflection, the rest of the crew struggled with their own inner demons. Farron found himself back on the battlefield where he had failed, surrounded by the screams of his fallen comrades. "You'll never escape your guilt, Farron," a voice whispered. "You'll always be haunted by the lives you couldn't save." Farron closed his eyes, the memories pressing in on him. "No," he whispered. "I've done what I can. I've fought for those who still need me." Slowly, the battlefield began to fade, and Farron stood strong once more. Arya stood in a dark forest, watching a version of herself walk away, her back turned to those who relied on her. "You've abandoned them," her reflection said. Arya clenched her fists. "I've never given up on them. I'll never stop fighting." As each crew member overcame their fear, the trial seemed to lose its grip, the darkness receding and leaving them standing firm in their resolve. With each trial, the crew began to break free from the grip of their fears, their true selves emerging stronger than before. The Guardian's voice returned, softer now, more contemplative. "You have passed the trial of the soul," it said, its tone filled with approval. "You have proven your strength, your resilience. Now, you may access the true power of this ship." The chamber began to glow with an intense light, the walls transforming into sleek, alien technology. The figure on the throne rose, its form fading into the light. "The power of the stars is now yours. Use it wisely." As the light filled the room, the crew felt a surge of energy. power beyond their understanding. They were no longer just explorers, they were chosen. The future of the galaxy now rested in their hands. "Let's go," Captain Orion said, his voice filled with new purpose. "We have a galaxy to save." The stellar nova powered up, its systems humming with the energy of the alien ship's power coursing through it. Captain Orion stood on the bridge, his hand resting on the command chair, as the crew worked quickly to adapt to the new capabilities. The ship felt different now, stronger, faster, more alive. "We've never had power like this before," Farron said, his voice tinged with awe as he monitored the systems. "It's like the ship is part of us." Orion nodded. "We've unlocked something ancient, something far beyond what we can imagine. But we're not here to explore its limits." He turned to the viewport, where the stars stretched out before them. "We're here to take the fight to the enemy." The crew exchanged determined glances. They had passed their trials, faced their darkest fears, and now they were ready to strike. The fate of the galaxy was in their hands. As the stellar nova moved through space, the crew set their course for the heart of enemy territory. "We've got a clear path to the enemy's stronghold," Aria reported, her eyes scanning the star charts. "But we'll have to navigate through some of their most heavily defended systems." Orion stood at the helm, his hands steady on the controls. "We've got one shot at this. If we're detected before we're in range, it'll be over before we even fire a shot." The crew was silent for a moment, each person reflecting on the gravity of their mission. "What's our strategy, Captain?" Farron asked. "We hit them hard, fast, and with everything we have," Orion said, his voice resolute. "This is the moment we've been waiting for. We have the power to turn the tide. Now, it's time to use it." The crew nodded in agreement, ready to face whatever awaited them. The stellar nova approached the enemy stronghold, a massive orbital fortress that dwarfed anything the crew had seen before. "This is it," Orion said, his voice filled with determination. "We make our move now." The crew worked in unison, coordinating their attack strategy. "Captain, we've detected a fleet of ships moving toward us," Aria said, her voice calm but tense. "It's a trap," Farron warned, his eyes narrowing. "They're expecting us. Doesn't matter," Orion replied, his jaw set. "We've got one advantage, the power of this ship. We'll break through their defenses before they even realize what's happening." The crew braced themselves as the stellar nova powered toward the enemy ships, its weapon systems coming online. "Prepare for impact," Orion ordered. "This is our chance. We take them down, or we don't make it out." The stellar nova surged forward, its weapons firing in a coordinated barrage that ripped through the enemy defenses. The fortress was massive, its shields holding strong, but the stellar nova had the element of surprise. "Their shields are weakening," Farron reported, his hands flying over the console. "We need to keep the pressure on." Orion nodded. "Full assault. Target their core." The enemy fleet retaliated, launching a barrage of counterfire that rocked the stellar nova. "Shields holding at 50%, Aria reported. "We can't take many more hits like that. We're not stopping," Orion said, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "They want a fight, we'll give them one. Hit their engines. If we cripple their mobility, we can finish this." The crew continued their assault, each member moving with precise coordination as the battle raged on around them. After what felt like an eternity of combat, the stellar nova finally broke through the enemy fortress defenses. With a final devastating strike, the ship's weapons targeted the core of the fortress, causing a massive explosion that rippled through space. The enemy fleet scattered in chaos, their once imposing ships now crippled. "It's over," Farron said, his voice filled with awe. "We did it." Captain Orion stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the wreckage. "Not yet. There's still the matter of the enemy's leadership." Aria checked the tactical displays. "We've located their flagship, Captain. It's heavily guarded, but it's not invincible." Orion nodded, his expression determined. "Then we finish this. Prepare for the final strike. We end this war today." With the enemy fortress in ruins, the crew of the stellar nova set their sights on the final prize, the flagship that had been commanding the entire enemy fleet. As they closed in, Captain Orion's resolve hardened. "This is the final phase of the war. We strike fast and we strike hard. There's no turning back now," he said. The crew worked quickly, preparing for the final battle. "Captain, the flagship is heavily armed and heavily shielded," Arya warned, her eyes fixed on the tactical displays. "But it's isolated. We've got one shot at this." Farron's voice rang through the bridge. "All systems are at peak capacity, Captain. We're ready." Orion's face remained focused, his mind calculating every possible outcome. "Good. This ends now. We take down their leadership, and this war is over." The stellar nova powered up, its engines roaring as it approached the enemy flagship. The battle that would decide the galaxy's fate was about to begin. The stellar nova engaged the flagship, its weapons systems unleashing a volley of fire at the enemy ship's defenses. The flagship retaliated, its weapons firing with brutal intensity. "Shields holding at 60%, Arya reported, her hands moving quickly over the controls. "They're not letting up." Orion's gaze never wavered. "We're not stopping either. Target their weak points." Farron analyzed the flagship's structure. "Their engines are vulnerable. If we disable them, they'll be dead in the water." Orion nodded. "Get in close, but don't get caught in their fire. Arya, make sure we're on them before they can react." The stellar nova darted through the enemy fire, its shields flashing as they absorbed the hits. The crew worked in perfect unison, their actions synchronized in a deadly dance as they closed the gap between themselves and the flagship's heart. As the stellar nova closed the distance, the enemy flagship fired a massive energy blast that sent a shockwave through space. "Brace for impact," Arya shouted as the ship rocked. The crew held tight as the blast caused the ship to spin momentarily, but the stellar nova quickly corrected its course. "Damage report," Orion barked. "Shields at 45%, hull integrity holding," Farron replied. "We're still in this fight. Keep it together," Orion said, his voice calm under pressure. "We're almost there." The stellar nova got in range and released a concentrated barrage aimed at the enemy flagship's engines. The blast struck home, causing the flagship to shudder violently. "They're losing power," Farron shouted. "Engines are disabled. We've got them." Orion gave a firm nod. "Prepare for boarding. This ends with them, not with us." The crew prepared to board the crippled flagship and end the conflict once and for all. With the enemy flagship crippled, the crew of the stellar nova prepared to board. They suited up and activated the boarding pods, their mission clear: take out the leadership and bring an end to the war. "This is it," Orion said, his eyes locked on the dark silhouette of the flagship, now vulnerable in space. "Once we board, we find their command center. We take control, or we don't make it back." Farron was the first to move, his weapon at the ready. "We've fought through worse, Captain," he said, his voice filled with resolve. The rest of the crew followed, each member focused on the mission ahead. The boarding pods launched, cutting through the emptiness of space toward the crippled flagship. The cold void outside contrasted with the heat of their resolve. "We'll finish this," Arya muttered, her face determined as she loaded her weapon. "Together, we end it." The pods slammed into the flagship's hull, ready to breach. The boarding pods smashed through the flagship's defenses, their metal hulls slicing through the weakening outer layers. The crew moved swiftly, storming the interior of the enemy ship. They encountered resistance almost immediately, elite soldiers trained to protect the flagship's command center. A fierce firefight erupted, weapons clashing as both sides fought for control. "We're almost there," Orion shouted over the chaos. "Push forward." Arya fired a precise shot, taking down an enemy officer. "We're closing in on their command center." The crew fought through the corridors, their hearts pounding as they navigated the narrow metallic hallways. Finally, they reached the command center. The doors slid open, revealing the enemy's top brass. Their leader, a towering figure in black armor, stood before them, his eyes filled with defiance. "You've made a mistake," he growled. "This will be your end." Orion's response was simple. "Not today." "Huh?" The command center was a chaotic battleground. The enemy commander, tall and imposing, stepped forward, his soldiers flanking him. The stellar Nova crew stood their ground, their weapons aimed and ready. "You think you can win this war?" the commander sneered, his voice booming through the tension-filled room. Captain Orion's gaze never wavered. "This war ends now," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Surrender, and we'll spare your people." The commander laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You're too late. The galaxy belongs to us now." He signaled to his soldiers, and the room erupted into a flurry of motion. Orion reacted instantly, firing at the enemy leader's guard. "Move in," he shouted. The crew launched into action, engaging in close combat with the enemy soldiers. The fate of the galaxy hinged on this moment: victory or total destruction. Captain Orion fought his way toward the enemy commander, dodging blasts and narrowly avoiding being hit. The enemy commander's soldiers were skilled, but Orion's crew was relentless. Farron moved in from the side, taking down another guard with a swift, lethal strike. "We're almost there, Captain," he shouted. The commander's eyes flicked nervously toward Farron, but he remained defiant. "You're wasting your time," he spat. "The war's already won. Your victory means nothing." Orion reached the commander, his gun trained on the man's chest. "Your people were given a chance," he said quietly. "Now it's over." With a quick, decisive move, Orion disarmed the commander, his soldiers defeated and retreating. The air was thick with the tension of finality. The battle was won, but the galaxy still hung in the balance. The commander fell to his knees, his resistance shattered. The crew, breathing heavily but victorious, gathered around Orion. "It's over," Arya said, her voice filled with relief. "We've won." Orion's expression remained hard, his mind already thinking of the aftermath. "This is just one battle," he said. "The war is far from over. We've disabled their leadership, but we need to stabilize the galaxy before chaos spreads." He turned to Farron, who was scanning the room for any remaining threats. "We need to send a message to the rest of the galaxy. Tell them the war is over and peace can begin again." Farron nodded, accessing the ship's communication systems. "Message sent, Captain. It's being broadcast across all known frequencies." Orion exhaled slowly. "Good. Now, we need to rebuild." The crew stood united, ready to face the challenges of the galaxy's reconstruction, but confident in their victory. The stellar Nova took off from the flagship's wreckage, its engines roaring to life as it ascended into the stars. Orion stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the vast expanse of space ahead. "We've won the battle, but now we have to secure the peace," he said. "We've gained a fragile victory, but there's much work left to be done." Arya, at her station, looked up from the tactical console. "The enemy has scattered, but their influence is still strong. We can't afford to let them regroup. We'll take it one step at a time," Orion said, his voice filled with resolve. "The galaxy is vast, but we're no longer fighting alone. We have the power to rebuild, to unite, and we will." Farron nodded in agreement. "Together, we'll ensure that this never happens again." The ship sped toward their next destination, toward a future full of uncertainty, but one they were determined to shape. As the stellar Nova moved into hyperspace, the crew gathered in the command center, their faces filled with determination. "The war may be over, but the work is just beginning," Orion said, his gaze fixed on the starry expanse ahead. "We'll need to unite the galaxy, rebuild the alliances that were lost, and ensure that peace can take root." Arya's voice broke through the silence. "We're not just soldiers anymore. We're diplomats, builders, and leaders." Farron turned to Orion, his expression serious. "But the scars of war run deep. It'll take time to heal, Captain." Orion nodded. "Time, yes, but together we'll rebuild, and we'll ensure that the galaxy never again falls into chaos." The crew exchanged resolute glances, ready for the next chapter of their journey. "The future is ours," Orion said, his voice steady and full of purpose. The stellar Nova surged forward into the unknown, its crew united in their mission to bring peace to the galaxy.